we go. Hello, Decluttering Club. I am so happy to be here with you today. We are going to be talking about decluttering and grief, which is a topic that I know is on the minds of so many of you. So many of you are struggling and suffering because of grief, and it just compounds the clutter. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. That is our topic. And I'm here with three of our amazing, gorgeous, wonderful decluttering coaches in our Decluttering Coach Network. And I'm going to introduce you to them here. So we have Karen Mace. Karen, why don't you tell a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm based in Australia, and I am a decluttering coach as well as a registered counsellor and provisional psychologist who works, specialises with people who have a chronic illness, helping them to balance their life and to declutter their life at the same time.
Awesome. Thank you. So glad you're here. All right, we have Donna Gregory. Donna, why don't you introduce yourself to us? And
well, good morning, everyone. I'm Donna Gregory, and I am a baby boomer, and my specialty is working with baby boomers, especially those of us who want to stay in our own home and are not ready to completely downsize and move. That's not a path that I'm on right now, but I strongly believe that we can enjoy our homes more and get rid of some of the burdens of some of the possessions we have, kind of pare it down, maybe freshen it up a little bit for the lifestyles we have now. And whether we're alone, as I am a widow, I have been widow for almost 9 years, or a couple, just to take another look at your home and what you have and what you don't need, and you can possibly get rid of and make more space, and so you can do the things you want to do, whether it's entertaining or just walking in the door after a trip and saying, oh, we're home, this is lovely. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that. Absolutely. I love the idea of staying in your own home too, right? People think sometimes, I have to move out. I've lost my partner and it's time for me to move out. And that may be the right choice, but it doesn't have to be. Awesome. And then we have Selena Jones. Selena, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello. So I'm a decluttering coach, and I'm also a grief and trauma therapist. So I help people declutter not only their emotions, but all the emotions that come up when we're dealing with our stuff. And I'm a firm believer that the two go hand in hand. So I'm really excited about today's talk.
Awesome. And you are in Canada.
Yes, I am, just outside of Toronto.
Right. And Donna, you are up in the Northeast, right?
I'm in Maryland, not too far
Maryland.
from Washington, D.C., sort of between Baltimore and D.C.
Got it. Okay. All right. So my first question is, why are you particularly interested in the grief aspect of decluttering? It's a big one, but there's also other angles. Like why do you have a personal interest? And any of you feel free to answer. How did you come to be particularly interested in that that angle of decluttering?
Well, I remember a Memorial Day weekend, and this was in 2001. My father had just passed away in northern Wisconsin, and the four of siblings got together for the weekend, no spouses, no children, and we went through all of his things. Now, my dad was a very organized person, but he had a lot of stuff, and it was very emotional. And I remember it so clearly how we sort of negotiated over some of his things, because he basically said, you guys figure it out, So we did. And I think it brought us closer. It wasn't easy, but it was kind of an adventure to go through his things. Although we really dearly missed him, we were kind of bonded in that way. And then when my husband passed away, I realized, okay, I have the decisions to make and I have the choices, but I have to do the work. or at least most of it. I had been saying for years, Roger, we need to clean out the garage. We really need to set aside some time to do this. And did it ever happen? No. In fact, when his parents passed away, he brought things from their house and we kept adding things. And so I had a big job, ahead of me, and I'm still, it's not totally done out there, but close. And I realized I'm not the only one going through this. So I was thrilled to find Organize My Home last spring. And I thought this is perfect, because Sarah, I had been following you as the early bird mom for several years, and I just said, okay, I'm doing this. I need to make this commitment. So.
Oh, wow. So we go way back then.
We go way back. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. I like how you said, it is something that you think, oh, we should deal with this. And then we just don't, because it's not pressing. We don't deal with it until it becomes pressing. And then it's harder. So then we have a bigger job to do. Yeah. So it sounds like when you went through it with your father's things, that it sounds like it was actually maybe a healing event.
Oh, it was. We would be in different parts of his house. He had a small house in Rhinelander, Wisconsin, in town. And he had this massive workshop in the basement with all of his everything, and we would go in different parts. He had a system of these huge file envelopes, and he had brochures for homes that we did not buy as a family. He had mementos from their honeymoon in 1944, and they had been divorced for several, but he kept all these things of my mother's who had passed away for us. And we would just shout out, oh, you have to come here and see what I just found. You won't believe this. So it was quite an amazing weekend. It was healing, and each of my siblings owned a truck, so they were able to pile their things and leave. And I said, well, I came by plane here, so I will be back, with a rental truck, which I did. And so my daughter and I moved the stuff into the truck and drove back over 4 days with my share of the things which I treasure, especially my grandfather's desk with the tall secretary glass cabinet. But yeah, it was a healing.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to throw you into, further depression.
No.
Sometimes it can actually be very, very positive experience, but it's not always like that. So let's go there. Let's go there. Selena or Karen, talk a little bit about, about the struggles that some of your clients have had, or if you want to share a personal story, because I know that often grief will just, if maybe there wasn't clutter in the past, or maybe there was some, but it gets a whole lot worse after a traumatic event. So talk a little bit about what you've seen there.
For me with my clients, I think that our emotions can be really tricky. So they can sneak up on us at times when we're not prepared for it. And I think one of the reasons why I essentially kind of wanted to marry my therapy practice with my declutter coaching is that sometimes people become paralyzed when an emotion comes up that they're not expecting, and they don't know how to process it. And so they shut down and they just sort of remove themselves, and they're not making they're not making progress. And, a lot of times I even know for myself, if I'm feeling balanced and good internally, then externally, my space is easier to take care of. If things feel chaotic internally, then usually the external space, you can see that chaos. And so anxiety and depression and feeling such intense losses, whether it's the loss, we've talked about of a spouse, parents, children, but also the loss of things like a marriage. If a marriage breaks down, that can have a lot of grief, and the journey is just a little bit different, and it's a different letting go process. So, I think having that additional support of how do we let go of the stuff while realizing that when we let go of the stuff, we're not letting go of the memories. We're not letting go of the love that was there. We're not letting go of the relationship and experiences that we've had with that person. But just also then figuring out when it brings up big feelings, how can we move through that without shutting down, with allowing ourselves to feel it? Because I'm a big believer that you have to feel it to heal it, right? And there can be these moments of joy, like Donna said, like it's not always such a horrific experience. Sometimes there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of good memories. There's oh my gosh, like Donna said, you're not going to believe what I found. I mean, I think there's, grief's a tricky journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, grief, well and truly is a tricky journey. And it comes in waves as well. And sometimes it can come out of the blue and just hit you and go, hang, I'm back there. And back there, it doesn't have to be a loss of a person or an animal or a marriage or something like that. It could be a loss, or it could be that you've moved on in your life from you had one career and you've retired from that. It could be that you were healthy and then you got some sort of illness or condition and you're actually grieving that. And that's just as much a part of the decluttering work as a loss of a person is, because you actually need to give yourself permission to grieve those things that you wouldn't necessarily look at as losses, but they take there's a huge cost to your life when you go through those, and they're just as important. I know for me, I used to teach. I was a teacher, and then I changed careers into counseling, but I had all the resources that I had from the years of teaching, and I had to make a decision as to what I was going to do with those resources as part of my decluttering journey. So, and a lot of my decluttering journey has been done after dealing with chronic pain and a chronic condition as well. So I had to grieve the ability for me just to be able to get out there and to do things with no limitations, because my body was giving me severe limitations on it. So
it's like you had to grieve the person that you were, even a new job, right? Like not being a teacher anymore. That's like a loss, right? And maybe it doesn't mean you don't love the new job. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But either way, it's like, oh, that's not who I am anymore. Like, I'm not that person. Like, where did that person go? It's really, especially if there's a chronic pain issue and you have to change the way that you show up in the world. Very challenging. Yeah. Yeah. Selena, go ahead.
Well, I just want to say that I think it's important to remember that no matter what kind of loss you're experiencing, one, it's not a competition. If you're struggling with everything that brings up, it's valid. It's valid. There's ways to help heal it. There's ways to move through it. Sometimes at a snail's pace, but a lot of times people will go, oh my gosh, well, I don't understand why I'm so upset at a job change when, my best friend's husband just had a heart attack, and, we start playing the comparison game, and it doesn't serve us, because our emotions, they don't just disappear. They wait for us to face them. They wait for us to process them. And, sometimes we get really good at compartmentalizing things. And just like sometimes in our decluttering journey, when we do what I call a stash and dash, people like to do that with their emotions. They love to shove it in a box, slam down the lid, pop it off to the side and be like, okay, I'm just going to deal that later. But eventually over time, that box becomes like a jack in the box. and the emotions jump out, and the sort of the chaos exposes itself, just like it does if we never deal with our stuff. If we just keep, you know, putting a bunch of mishmash in bins and putting them in boxes and shoving them off to the side, we're not dealing with the stuff, and that stuff's going to wait for us to deal with it. It doesn't magically go away on its own. It's the same with our emotions.
That's so good, right? Like we think, okay, I'm just not gonna deal with this feeling right now. Well, that feeling is gonna wait for you, right? It might wait for decades. And we think we're escaping it by avoiding it, but it's still there, and it's still affecting us. Maybe not as strongly as if we just sit with it and just be sad or be upset or whatever, but it's still having an effect. You have to go through those things. Oh, that's so good. I love the idea of not comparing, right? Because if we think, well, my problems aren't like, you know, I'm not starving, I'm not this or that, then we just make it that much worse, and we deny our feelings, we deny our experience, which doesn't help our best friend or anybody else, right? It doesn't.
And it doesn't help us make progress. It doesn't help us make progress internally, and it doesn't help us make progress externally. If anything, the energy that can be used to help us create a space that we feel safe and good in, we're putting all that energy into avoidance. And we're just shoving things down and pushing them aside again. And when it comes back, it usually comes back a little bit stronger than the time before, right? And then we wonder why we're not making progress, because that energy is going towards the things that are holding us down and holding us back, right? Instead of really, truly sitting with it. If we need help figuring out how to process it, you know, get access to help, get access to support, but that's what helps you move forward.
Totally. Okay, so how do we do this? How does this work? Let's say someone comes to you and they say, you know, I'm completely distraught. My house is, you know, full to the brim. I've lost someone I love. You know, what are the tools that you use to work with them? Like, where would you start, or what's something that you could give to someone?
I think I would say start with any size steps count. Baby steps absolutely count. They absolutely get you moving. But start small and start with the easy stuff, with the most complex stuff that you can have. Go and pick something that, for example, go and clear out all the expired food or the expired medicines that you have in your cupboard. I mean, you can't use them anyway, you know. But it builds a momentum from there when you start small.
Yeah, and you're the queen of baby steps, because I know you did an entire room just like inch by inch, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So powerful.
So yes, I mean, my decluttering story was basically I had a whole room that you couldn't get in at all. And over a 10-month period, I cleaned it out to completely gone. I think I got 2 boxes left that whole time, that whole room. So.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, so it's not like you don't understand, right? And I think a lot of times we, especially when people look to you all as coaches, or they look to me, they think, well, you know, you're just telling me what to do, but you don't really get it, right? Like, how could you possibly understand? But I know with all 3 of you, you do understand, because you have done that work and you're still doing the work, right? It's like Donna said earlier, it doesn't necessarily end, but we can get to a point where life is easier, right? And I think that's what we're looking for. That's where we're going. What else? What else would you say to someone who's just starting out? What do you think, Donna?
Well, I would find out where they are right now, because you, first of all, people are going to give you advice when you first lose someone, and you could listen politely, thank them, but don't take their advice necessarily, because they're either giving it to you based on their experience, which might be different, or I am firmly a believer of, if you have not lost a spouse or an intimate partner, you don't get it. You know, you can empathize, but you don't really know what that's like. But so I would ask some questions and listen. How are things going? How are you as a person? Are you taking care of yourself, and how are you doing? And then maybe start with, okay, what do you think you need to do first? You don't have to live in a museum. You want your house to be for you. And maybe that seems selfish at first. I'll never forget a member of my church a couple decades ago. Her husband passed away very suddenly. And within 3 days, she had loaded her car with all his magazines that he had kept for decades and taken them to the dump. And she didn't feel like she was being disrespectful. She said, I got those out of my house. She was happy to, and that was like her first step. But you want to make yourself a home that you're going to enjoy. But you have to be gentle with yourself. So you don't have to do it all at once. And just don't let other people, I would say, do not let other people take you over, because sometimes that happens. And I have a very dear neighbor across the street who lost his wife about 1.5 years ago. And they had lots of things, lots of clutter. And his middle daughter, who always has been the most caring, said, well, Dad, do you want me to help you with this? And he said, yes, please go ahead. So she's been working slowly on it, but she didn't just rush in and take over. I met another dear gentleman when I was visiting my family in Arizona, and he said to me, his wife had not been gone 1 year and she died very suddenly. He said, I'm sorry that I sold our house. I wish I hadn't done that so quickly. He said, my daughter said, oh no, you're going to come and live with us. And he said, all my memories are in storage. I have a beautiful bedroom. I see my granddaughters every day, but I'm sad because all of Charlotte's things are in storage. And he let them kind of overwhelm, because his daughters love him and they wanted to move on, but you don't have to move on right away.
That's so good, right? Like everybody, even if it's well-meaning, everybody thinks they know what you should do, but maybe they don't. Right? And it's okay. It's okay to say, yeah, no, thank you. Not right now, maybe later, but this is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take some time. That's such a good advice, to be willing to say no. I mean, I imagine you must be very disoriented, right, in that initial time, and it's really hard to know what to do. So it might be easy to just let other people swoop in and take care of it. Maybe you want to wait.
Well, because you also are dealing with legal things and financial things. You especially if you are a widow or widower, and then there are all his belongings. I will never forget one Saturday, and this was about 4 months after Roger passed away. His adult son, I have adult stepchildren, so that's another landmine possibility. They offered to come over and help me, and they did, with their 3 kids, and they kind of swooped through my house, and it was overwhelming. I would not advise people to do that. My passport ended up in the trash. Luckily I found it, but the whole day was just it was too much, and I was overwhelmed, and I learned a big lesson. But and I still get along with them. Don't get me wrong, but it was not. I wouldn't advise that.
Live and learn.
Yep.
Yeah. Selena, what about you? What tools do you use with your clients?
If it's a fresh experience, I remind them that they've already had one major life-changing event. So it's not the time to make more life-changing decisions, other than the ones that they legally have to move through, like Donna said. And I think one thing that I learned from one of my clients, when her and her sister inherited her mom's home, and it was the family home, and it's a really, really large piece of property, and someone had given her the permission to not be the museum curator.
Mm.
And I loved that. I was like, okay, because it gave her freedom in a different level of responsibility. It's not her job to hold it all together. It's her job to decide what this space is going to be now, because she has officially moved into her mom's old home. And she sort of needed to re-envision this space and go, what, you know, it served its purpose for me and my siblings growing up, but what's its purpose now? And giving ourselves permission in the beginning, just daydream about it, because it's really, it's a mind bender when you, especially if the person that you've lost is someone you share space with all the time, you have a loss of routine and you have a loss of predictability, and it turns it on its head. And I think that, like Donna had alluded to, anybody that you're bringing into this space when you feel so incredibly vulnerable, they have to have good boundaries. They really have to have good boundaries, because people will move through a space in the way that they respond to grief, maybe not in the way that you respond to the grief, because there's no hierarchy in our decluttering journey. If we get it done in 3 weeks, is no better than the person that takes 3 years. Like, we have to move at our own pace. And for the people that feel good about just sort of dealing with it and getting it done and moving things out of the space, then that's great. If that works for them, that's great. But we have choices. And maybe there's things that are easy to let go of in the beginning, and then things that are hard. But I like the idea of switching it up. So if there's things that are hard to process, let's work through that stuff. It is going to get overwhelming. It is going to be physically tiring because you've used so much emotional energy, but then mix it up with the easier stuff like Karen talked about. Look through expired medications, maybe clean out your freezer. Something got freezer burnt, we can let go of that, because that's not asking a lot of our emotions. Those are pretty black and white decisions. And then it kind of gives us a reprieve. We feel like we're accomplishing little things, and then we can go back to and take another little dive at that hard stuff again, but without feeling like we're drowning all the time. I think there needs to be some kind of balance.
Yeah, that's good. I think that probably people have an idea of what this is supposed to look like, right? And we're doing it wrong. Like, this is the right way to move on after you've lost someone, or after you've lost a job or whatever. And clearly nobody's going to do it that perfect way. And so we have so much judgment for ourselves, and that just makes it worse, right? Like, we're already grieving and now we feel judged. We're judging ourselves, or maybe other people are judging us too. So I love that it's not a race. There's no timeline. That's so good.
And the perfect way for you is the wrong way, absolutely the wrong way for other people. So you can have 2 people, even 2 siblings or whatever, that have exactly the same situation, and they handle it really, really differently. And it can be right for each one of them. And grief takes as long as grief takes as well. It's some days are good days, some days are bad days. And some days getting up and having a shower is the absolute extent of what you can do in that day. And other days you're okay and you can have some sort of functionality, and giving yourself grace, giving yourself the compassion around that, that it is your journey. And some days even you can't even think. The reality is you can't even think. You can't work out some of the most simplest things type of thing. It's just too hard for your brain to function. And on those days, stop trying to make decisions. You know what I mean? Just keep moving. And some days it doesn't even matter which direction you're moving in. If there is some movement, then you will be in a different place from where you were.
Absolutely. Well, I think this is the perfect time to just invite people, if people who are watching are struggling with these kinds of issues, I invite you to reach out to one of these women. I know you all work one-on-one with people individually, right? And they would be thrilled to hear from you, to have a chat and see if you would be a good fit, right? We have links to all of their websites. So we're going to include that with the video, wherever you're watching this video, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube or on our blog. There's links for Karen and Donna and Selena, and you can absolutely reach out to them. Like I said, they'd love to talk to you. And I think it's so powerful to have someone to talk to, right? We were talking about this before we started, right? Just like beyond, I mean, they have tools, right? They have tools to work with clients, and that is amazing. But even before you get to that, just having someone who can listen without judgment, right? Someone who's got the objective perspective is incredibly valuable and incredibly powerful. So I recommend that you reach out to Karen, Selena, and Donna if you need some help with this topic. All right, ladies, thank you so much for being here. This was fabulous. I really appreciate your time. I know this is a really, really important topic for our community. So thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.